I'm the Philosophical Bachelor, and today I'm going to look at Peter Singer's paper, Famine, Affluence and Morality. Finally, to say, to give or not to give, there is no question. Even the most fortunate among us are no strangers to misery. In Famine, Affluence and Morality, Peter Singer sings an emphatic ditty, throwing down the gauntlet for anyone better off than the worse off to give, and to keep giving till it almost hurts. Why he uses the 1971 East Bengal famine as his call to arms? His arguments can be extended to any form of desperate need, such as disaster relief, extreme poverty, or any number of the miserable conditions afflicting our fellow men. His clarion call may sound a little too shrill for most in 1972 to stomach, but his arguments remain unfortunately relevant today, perhaps even more so, considering the desperation of refugees fleeing terrible conditions only to face unwelcoming host countries, and the increasing tempo of natural disasters such as tsunamis, earthquakes, and volcano eruptions afflicting first and third world nations alike. Singer begins by stating how people will tend to agree that suffering and death resulting from insufficient food, a lack of shelter, and inadequate healthcare is a tragedy. He believes that if it is in our power to prevent something bad from happening, without thereby sacrificing anything of comparable moral importance, we ought morally to do it. His article argues persuasively for this moral principle. Most people would not hesitate to rescue a drowning child from a pond at the expense of sullying their clothes or being late for work. It is a small price to pay, and is of little moral import compared with the death of that child. Having softened up his reader through this thoughtful example, Singer issues his main challenge. Wherein lies the difference between that child and another far away that could likewise be rescued from certain death? Geographic proximity is of no relevance to his moral principle. Those who think otherwise is simply discriminating against someone because she is far away. Aid agencies, even in the 1970s, could already effectively reach the needy in distant lands as easily as those much nearer. For those still unconvinced, to help the starving East Bengalis, Singer adds to his example a crowd of gawking bystanders who had not yet mounted a rescue. Singer says we remain on the hook to help. Numbers do not lessen obligation, and is not an excuse for inactivity, he writes. According to Singer, we need to help, or in the case of financial aid, to give as much as we can, since the masses cannot be depended upon to chip in. You can practically visualize his readers on the knife edge pleading with open wallets. Sir, how much should we be contributing? Singer's reply is enough to stop them in their tracks. He thinks one needs to give at least to the point when giving more would cause severe problems for oneself and one's dependents. He considers this the weak version of his reply. The strong version is to stop giving when that gift of $1 more would bring as much suffering to the benefactor as the suffering that would have been avoided for the beneficiary. Lest a potential donor thinks that she will at least have the pleasure of performing a charitable act, Singer denies her even that satisfaction. The act of giving is a duty and not a supererogatory act of charity, he writes. Such a change of perspective makes a world of difference, according to Singer. The notion of charitable giving suggests that there is no obligation and implies a generosity on the part of the giver. In case there is any doubt in his reader's mind, Singer reinforces, we ought to give the money away, and it is wrong not to do so. He acknowledges that this change in our moral conceptual scheme, which he considers limited, has radical implications. He foresees two objections. Firstly, some will consider his suggested moral conceptual scheme too extreme, since moral condemnation is usually dished out to those breaching moral norms and not those who enjoy themselves instead of contributing to humanitarian causes. He dismisses this objection. What the current practice is irrelevant to his normative argument. Secondly, if we accept his principle, we ought morally to be working full-time to relieve great suffering of the sort that occurs as a result of famine or other disasters. He writes, most instances of simple pleasures, such as watching a funny movie or having a beer in a bar, will seem almost too exorbitant relative to the great suffering of those escaping famine or genocide. Hence we would, in his scheme, need to refrain. It is here that Singer takes a step too far. If we, the more fortunate, have to be deprived of even simple pleasures, perhaps with a picture of the suffering hordes plastered on our foreheads to continually remind us of our good fortune, it may completely disincentivize us from working harder or doing well for ourselves, since we'll be effectively paying a massive tax on the outcomes of our labor, which will go to feed, clothe, medicate, and shelter the less fortunate. A balance must be struck. The weak version of Singer's moral principle seems to be his concession. The givers are permitted to stop when giving more would cause severe problems for themselves and those depending on them. He has kept what is severe open in this article, which seems wise, leaving it up to the giver to decide based on her pain tolerance. Chapter 2 of Money and Mouths. Assuming that his readers have accepted his conclusions, Singer addresses further considerations such as whether foreign aid is in fact the responsibility of the state. Some may argue that giving privately allows the government and the non-contributing members of society to escape their responsibilities. On the contrary, Singer suspects that if the people do not show interest by giving voluntarily, the government would think that they do not wish their tax dollars to go to such causes. He calls out the hypocrisy of those who talk this way. Most will take no further action such as lobbying the government on the matter. Recognizing the importance of political action, Singer believes lobbying for new standards for public and private giving needs to be done. He tackles another important objection. Unless there is effective population control, relieving famine merely postpones starvation. For advocates of this position, Singer has a ready solution consistent with his schema. They can simply divert their gifts towards organizations for population control, essentially putting their probable money where their mouths are. Chapter 3 Changing the World One Philosopher at a Time. Singer is clear that even the actions required by the weak version of his principle will require a big change in the way we consume. The amount splurged on trifles will fall as more funds flow to helping the needy, potentially leading to a smaller gross national product, and hence a reduced level of contribution. Singer is unworried by such a prospect. First, the current level of giving considered acceptable, approximately 1% of GNP, does not come close to the magnitude of change he is thinking of. Besides, this does not affect his more significant point concerning the individual duty to give to those in need. Secondly, he hints at how we can find the optimal level of giving such that it will maximize the contribution and GNP. In conclusion, Singer believes that this issue affects any person who has more wealth than required to stay afloat or who has the capacity to take political action. He exhorts his fellow philosophers to discuss the matter in their universities and to take action by sacrificing some of their consumeristic inclinations so as to give. Singer has made a powerful case for why we must not shirk our duty. He is relentless in mowing down potential objections through an almost irresistible logic. He seems, however, to have failed to realize why people may be ready to dive into the muddy pond to save that drowning child while ignoring the hordes of starving children in a distant land. Joseph Stalin has been credited with the insight that the death of one is a tragedy, while the death of millions is a statistic. The sight of that flailing child evokes a primal response by all but the most callous of passerbys to plunge straight into the waters. The suffering of multitudes on the evening news elicit yawns from the very same people. Charities have long realized that compelling personal stories of their beneficiaries are the key to stir the heartstrings of a desensitized public. Singer, however, can leave such histrionics to the fundraising arms of these charitable organizations. He has succeeded in a different way by adding a sharp and powerful arrow to the quiver of the intelligentsia to help them make an eloquent case to policymakers and private individuals alike that we need to start giving more. Thank you.